The areas that we worked very hard to develop recommendations within were about 5 major categories, and this is material that you can take home as you get organized here in Westchester County. And they are, when you think about it, a lot of this policy and data work we do also has to pass the grandmother test. You know, if you were talking about it with your grandmother, would she get why it made sense, why it seemed like a practical thing to do? So a lot of this is really when you think about why are families poor? Families are poor because there's not enough income coming in. Why isn't there enough income coming in? Because levels of education and training are just not up to the economy that we're dealing with today. You know, in Providence, we were an industrial revolution type town. We made textiles and jewelry, and those jobs have left. We haven't transitioned quick enough to an information-based economy, nor do we have the workforce that's educated enough to follow this economic trajectory. So the first area of work was to help low-wage workers to improve skills and obtain quality jobs. And so among the things that were recommended here were to increase access to adult education and training programs and post-secondary education. This one, we were fortunate enough to piggyback on some really good state work that was happening. I don't know about Westchester, but in times like these, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to take a real hard look at which programs are effective and which aren't. We had this kind of just glob of adult ed programs of very varying, vastly varying quality. And we had a very visionary leader take over adult ed coordination at the state level. And he really established some criteria. Okay, if you're a provider of these services and you want to still play in this field, you have to meet these criteria in terms of your qualifications to offer adult ed and the kind of outcomes that you're showing with your clients. And this was, I don't know about here in New York, but unfortunately this was pretty cutting edge in Rhode Island. It was just, it's been too long of you're doing God's work. You know, we know how hard you're trying. Well, I think that the people that we serve should expect more. And now in these times, I think some of that sorting that is probably long overdue is happening. So what we ended up doing is connecting this statewide effort to a real push in Providence. So we had some of that horsepower ready. And now we really are significantly, in the last year, have expanded access for Providence residents for adult education and training programs. Expand sector-based career pathways for low-skill, low-wage workers. We have certain employers in Providence, some in the healthcare arena, that want to get in early and say, these are the jobs that are going unfilled. How can we back up and do some training to people who will eventually apply and get them ready for these areas that we know where there's jobs and they're going unfilled. We're not getting the kind of qualified people we need. Improve employment opportunities for city residents. That was difficult when the task force report went into place in 2007. It's even worse now. But it's that constant kind of gets jobs stupid. It's having employment opportunities, so you're bringing up the skills of the workforce, and you're also trying to convince companies to come to Providence and Rhode Island in order to have jobs for people to get. The next area is that if we continue in our inner cities to have 30% of our kids drop out of school, then it's a prescription for poverty. So that whole poverty pipeline is just incredibly important right now to start turning that around. Otherwise, it's going to feel like a finger in the dike all the time. Our State Department of Ed used to have a different kind of graduation rate calculation, which basically said it pegged our graduation rate in the state at 85%. But that was because it counted kids that went more than 4 years. It counted some things like a GRE and that kind of thing. And it's not that there's anything wrong with those things. Some kids take longer. But it kind of masked the real dropout number. And when we did it that way, and now the National Governors Association has kind of blessed this new dropout and graduation rate calculation, only 71% of Rhode Island high school students enter 9th grade and graduate 4 years later with their peers. And that shocking statistic is felt all over. Yours is probably very similar. It's very similar to the national average. So that is totally a pipeline of poverty because those kids really have very little chance of having the kind of skills they need to succeed. So one of the areas was connecting youth to jobs and college. And so we have work to do on all ends of that spectrum. So the mayor, separate from this report, is working hard to improve public education, as all mayors are across the country, both for kids who are in school and graduating without the skills they need to work, even if they get a high school diploma. How many of you have seen kids that enter your community college system and they need so much, not even community college, maybe SUNY, wherever, and they get there, NYU, they need 6 months of remedial before they even can get into their first class with any kind of comfort level. So we brought in the community colleges and we're connecting them to the superintendent, and we're saying we have to connect the dots here because we're losing too many kids, and even the kids that are in the 71% that make it, many of those don't have the skills they need to have employers be confident. Yes?
Unfortunately, Sarah Palin said that her daughter and her daughter's whatever he is were not dropouts. They didn't, according to your statistic, they did not finish high school in 4 years, and they're in a GED program, but she didn't consider them dropouts. So if on that level, that's also one of the opinions that we're getting. Imagine it's mind-boggling.
You're right, very, very good point. So that was a way to really mask a lot of this problem because those kids don't get reconnected oftentimes. And I said GRE, I meant GED, thank you. Reduce the high cost of being poor. Now this was a set of practical things that people who are blessed to have every advantage in life don't encounter. You take the meager incomes that Cora put up on the board, $20,000 for a family of 4, and then imagine that everything costs more because you're poor. And so by that I mean things like part of the character of urban neighborhoods where many people live below the poverty line are small grocery stores, and that's part of the culture, and that's great. They are so up against it in terms of pricing of food that every product in those stores costs a lot more. So one of the recommendations was not to obliterate that part of Providence neighborhood character, but to join the bodegas and the small grocery stores together in co-ops and have them do some group purchasing. That's not rocket science, but it's practical. And so we can keep the store, access walking distance to families, not import some of these big supermarkets that kind of are there today and gone tomorrow when things don't work out, and have that co-op purchasing to get prices to be lower. The next thing that often happens are predatory lending practices in inner city neighborhoods. There's no regular financial services in many of these neighborhoods, and so you get check cashing outfits and payday lending, and these things are taking the meager paycheck, and it costs so much to actually get the cash that they're further and further behind when that happens. So the mayor has reached out and tried to have there be safety in numbers, and we know that it's always a risk for banks to go into communities. We know there's some real concerns there, and they have to be addressed, but we've had good feedback from our bank presidents and their community folks to really look at trying to provide access to regular banking services in inner city neighborhoods where at best those kinds of banks have been few and far between. The next thing is rent-a-center, furniture places. If some poor neighborhoods have more than one of anything, it's rent-a-furniture center kind of place. And we cranked some numbers that show that for a couch, for $20 a week rental, over the course of a year, with the fees and everything, it's $2,080 for that couch. So the mayor approached Cardi's Furniture, and they were already doing this, and this gave them a place to do it in a more prominent way. Special loan programs for folks who wanted to purchase furniture. So that same couch, over the course of this Cardi's plan, was an $800 couch that they basically paid $800 for, rather than this $2,000 monstrosity that's carted away and then they're further in debt.